I'm Rachel, 34. And I still can't believe what happened last Christmas. Standing in my parents' living room, watching my niece and nephew unwrap brand new iPhones while my kids clutched their $20 Barnes & Noble gift cards, I felt my blood boil. Mom had promised a $50 max for everyone after I specifically said I couldn't compete with my sister Heather's spending. Mom's betrayal wasn't just about the gifts. It was the final proof that the family hierarchy I'd suspected my entire life was painfully real. If you've ever felt that sting of family favoritism, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Before I share how this Christmas disaster led to uncovering decades of family secrets and eventually some long overdue justice, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Have you ever caught a family member breaking their own rules? Hit that subscribe button and let's dive into how one Christmas morning changed everything in my family forever. To understand why those iPhones hit me so hard, you need to know about my family. I'm an elementary school teacher, married to Mark, a carpenter with his own small business. We have two amazing kids, Lily, who's 10, and Ethan, who's 8. We live in a modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs. We're comfortable but definitely budget conscious, especially after last year. My sister Heather is 2 years younger than me, 32, and couldn't have a more different life. She's a corporate lawyer married to Brian, an investment banker. They have twins, Emma and Mason, who are 11. They live in a mini mansion in the expensive part of town with a pool, home theater, and all the trimmings. Heather drives a Mercedes SUV while I'm still nursing my 2012 Honda through yet another winter. Growing up, I always sensed my parents favored Heather, but in ways that were subtle enough that complaining would make me sound petty. For her 16th birthday, Heather got a car. For mine, I got a watch. When we shared a bedroom, Heather got the side with the bigger closet because she had more clothes to store. My mom, Eleanor, attended all of Heather's soccer games but only made it to about half of my debate team competitions because they all seemed the same. Our parents, Eleanor and Robert, weren't terrible people. Mom was a school administrator before retiring, and Dad worked as an accountant. They provided for us, took us on vacations, and never missed a birthday. But there was always this undercurrent of preference. I tried everything to earn equal footing. I graduated with honors, while Heather barely maintained a B average. I never gave them a moment of trouble while Heather went through a rebellious phase in high school. I chose teaching, partly because my mom worked in education, hoping we'd bond over shared experiences. Nothing changed the dynamic. As adults, the pattern continued. When I announced my engagement to Mark, Mom's first question was whether we'd have a simple ceremony to save money. When Heather got engaged 6 months later, Mom immediately started researching destination wedding venues. Mark noticed the differences right away, but encouraged me to maintain the relationship for my sake. "They're still your parents," he'd say. "They love you in their own way." I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Heather needed more attention. Maybe she was more outgoing and naturally commanded the spotlight. Maybe I was being oversensitive. I kept visiting regularly, calling weekly, including them in holidays and special occasions. I wanted my kids to have grandparents in their lives, even if those grandparents sometimes made me feel like I was still sitting at the kids' table at 34. Previous Christmases had shown the pattern in smaller ways. Heather's kids would get slightly more expensive gifts, but the difference was plausibly deniable. One year they got tablets while my kids got board games, but Mom insisted. The tablets were on sale, practically the same price. Another year, the twins got expensive winter coats while my kids got sweaters. But Mom said, the twins needed coats anyway, so it was practical. Last year was particularly tight for us financially. Mark had injured his back at a job site in September and couldn't work for nearly 2 months. Workers' comp only covered so much, and our savings took a serious hit. By November, I was genuinely worried about Christmas. At Thanksgiving dinner, I brought up the idea of setting a strict limit on gift giving. Maybe we could all agree to spend no more than $50 per person this year? I suggested during dessert. That way the kids all get something nice but nobody feels pressured. "That's a wonderful idea," Mom had said, patting my hand. $50 max for everyone. I think that's perfect. Dad nodded in agreement while Heather looked mildly annoyed but shrugged her acceptance. I felt such relief driving home that night. For once, Christmas wouldn't be a reminder of the financial gap between our families. My kids wouldn't feel the difference in their grandmother's eyes. I could buy thoughtful gifts within our budget without feeling inadequate. Christmas would be about family, not money. How completely, utterly wrong I was. Christmas morning started like any other in our house. The kids woke us up at 6:30, desperate to see what Santa had brought. We'd managed to get Lily the art supplies she wanted and Ethan the Lego set he'd been eyeing for months. Not extravagant, but things they genuinely wanted. They seemed thrilled, which warmed my heart. For my parents and Heather's family, we'd carefully selected gifts that respected the $50 limit. For the twins, we found books by their favorite author, special edition hardcovers that came just under budget. For my parents, Mark had made a beautiful wooden photo frame with a family picture, and we paired it with a gift card to their favorite restaurant. For Heather and Brian, we got a nice bottle of wine and gourmet chocolates. Remember, I told the kids as we loaded the car, Christmas at Grandma's might be a little simpler this year. Everyone's giving smaller presents, but that means we can focus on being together instead. Lily nodded solemnly. It's not about the presents anyway, right, Mom? If only my mother shared my daughter's wisdom. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 40 minutes. Their house was decorated tastefully as always. White lights outlining the roof, a wreath on the door, and Mom's collection of nutcrackers arranged on the mantel. Family photos lined the hallway, though I couldn't help noticing there were more recent ones of Heather's family than ours. Merry Christmas! Mom called, opening the door in her festive red sweater before we even knocked. She hugged the kids, then me, then Mark. Dad appeared behind her, camera in hand, already documenting everything. Where are Heather and Brian? I asked, noticing the empty driveway. Oh, they're running a bit late, Mom said, ushering us inside. Something about the twins needing to organize their Santa gifts before coming over. We settled in, the kids playing with the gifts they'd brought from home while Mark helped Dad set up the leaf in the dining table. I offered to help Mom in the kitchen, where she was preparing hot chocolate. Can I help with anything? I asked. No, I've got it all under control, she insisted, though I noticed she seemed distracted, checking her watch periodically. When the doorbell finally rang an hour later, Mom practically sprinted to answer it. Heather swept in, designer boots and cashmere coat, followed by Brian carrying several glossy shopping bags with expensive-looking tissue paper peeking out the top. The twins rushed past everyone, already asking where the presents were. Sorry we're late, Heather said, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was terrible, and the twins were so excited they barely slept. Did you see what Santa brought us? Mason asked my Ethan immediately. I got a new gaming system and Emma got a designer purse she wanted. I exchanged glances with Mark. So much for teaching gratitude and moderation. Mom fussed over Heather, taking her coat and offering her hot chocolate with those special marshmallows you like. Dad engaged Brian in conversation about the stock market, while the twins dominated the conversation, talking over my children whenever they tried to speak. During Christmas dinner, the pattern continued. Mom asked the twins about their private school, their tennis lessons, their upcoming skiing trip. When I mentioned Lily had won the school spelling bee, Mom said, "That's nice, dear," before turning back to Emma to hear more about her horse riding lessons. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, our silent signal that he noticed too. Dad seemed uncomfortable but, as usual, said nothing to redirect the conversation. I caught him watching me a few times with what looked like sympathy in his eyes. As we finished dessert, I noticed more gigantic gift bags had appeared under the tree, all with Emma and Mason's names in my mother's handwriting. My stomach tightened. I could already see where this was heading, but I desperately hoped I was wrong. Time for presents, Mom announced cheerfully, as if she hadn't just spent the last hour building up my anxiety to unbearable levels. We gathered in the living room for the traditional gift opening ceremony. In our family, we always went youngest to oldest, meaning Ethan would start, followed by Lily, then the twins, and so on. Here you go, Ethan, Mom said, handing him a small, neatly wrapped package. This is from Grandma and Grandpa. Ethan carefully unwrapped it, revealing a $20 Barnes & Noble gift card. Thank you, he said politely, though I could see the slight confusion in his eyes. Next was Lily. Her gift was nearly identical. Another $20 gift card, but to Michael's craft store. She smiled and thanked them. But I could tell she was puzzled too. We'd told them about the $50 limit, but $20 seemed even more modest than expected. Still, I was relieved. At least everyone was sticking to modest gifts. Or so I thought. Now, Emma and Mason, Mom said, her voice suddenly rising with excitement. Grandma and Grandpa have something very special for you too. My mother handed each twin an enormous gift bag. The expensive kind from department stores with sturdy handles and high-quality tissue paper. The twins tore into them with none of the careful unwrapping my children had shown. "Oh my God," Emma squealed, pulling out a brand new iPhone in its box, complete with a designer case and wireless earbuds. "Awesome," Mason echoed, revealing an identical package. "It's the newest model." My heart sank to my stomach as I watched my children's faces fall. Lily looked at me with hurt and confusion in her eyes. Ethan stared at his $20 gift card, then at the twins' extravagant gifts, clearly trying to understand what had happened. "Mom," I said quietly, trying to control my voice, "I thought we agreed on a $50 limit for everyone." "Well," my mother said dismissively, not even looking at me as she helped the twins open their phone boxes. "They're older and needed phones for school anyway. It's not just a gift. It's a necessity." Heather caught my eye and had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but she quickly covered it with a smile as she helped Emma set up her new phone. "These must have cost hundreds of dollars," Mark said, his voice tight. "Oh, they were on sale." Mom waved her hand vaguely. "Besides, Brian and I went in together on them, right, Brian?" Brian looked confused for a moment before nodding unconvincingly. Dad was suddenly very interested in adjusting the Christmas tree ornaments, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Mommy," Ethan whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "Why did Emma and Mason get phones and we got gift cards? Did we do something wrong?" That was it. I couldn't sit there and watch my children believe they were less deserving of their grandmother's love. "No, honey, you didn't do anything wrong," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's go get some more cookies from the kitchen." I led my children to the kitchen, Mark following close behind. Once we were alone, Lily's eyes welled with tears. "Grandma loves them more than us, doesn't she?" she asked. "No, sweetie," I lied, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Grandma just has different ideas about gifts than we do. Remember what we said about Christmas not being about presents?" "But she promised," Ethan insisted. "You said everyone was getting the same this year." Mark put his hand on my shoulder. "Maybe we should head home early," he suggested quietly. "We could watch those Christmas movies the kids have been wanting to see." I wanted nothing more than to leave, but I couldn't bear the thought of giving my mother the satisfaction of driving us away, of confirming her belief that I was too sensitive about these things. "We'll stay a little longer," I decided. "But we don't have to go back in there right now." I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and finally let the tears flow. Years of being second best, of watching my children experience the same treatment, came pouring out. I cried silently, running the water to mask any sounds until I could compose myself enough to return. When I came back, Heather was showing off the matching designer sweaters she and Brian had bought for the twins, clearly far exceeding any gift limit. My parents were admiring them while my children sat quietly on the couch, looking uncomfortable. We went through the motions for the rest of the gift exchange. I barely registered opening my own presents. All I could focus on was getting through the afternoon without causing a scene that would further upset my children. The drive home was quiet. Even the kids sensed something was wrong and didn't ask the questions I knew were on their minds. Mark reached over and squeezed my hand at stoplights, his silent way of saying I'm here. That night, after the kids were finally asleep, I sat on our bed and let the anger I'd been suppressing all day wash over me. This wasn't just about presents. This was about my mother breaking a promise directly to my face. About sending a message to my children that they were less important, less valued than their cousins. "I can't let this go," I told Mark. "Not this time." "I know," he said simply. "And I'll support whatever you decide to do." I barely slept that night, rehearsing what I would say to my mother. By morning, I knew exactly what needed to happen. I dropped the kids off at their friend's house the next morning for a play date. giving Mark a chance to catch up on work in his shop. Then I drove to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. During the drive, memories surfaced that I'd long suppressed. My 8th birthday, when Heather had thrown a tantrum and Mom had let her open one of my presents to calm her down. My high school graduation, when Mom had spent more time introducing Heather to her colleagues than congratulating me. My wedding day, when she'd criticized my simple dress while showing everyone pictures of the designer gown she was already planning to buy for Heather's future wedding. When I arrived, Mom seemed surprised to see me. She was still in her robe, cleaning up Christmas wrapping paper and organizing the twins' gifts that had apparently been left behind. "Rachel, I didn't expect you today. Is everything all right?" "No, Mom. Everything is not all right," I said, closing the door behind me. "What's wrong? Is it the kids? Mark?" She seemed genuinely confused, which only fueled my anger. How could she not know? "We need to talk about yesterday. About the gifts." Mom sighed dramatically. "Oh, Rachel, not this again. You've always been so sensitive about these things. You promised a $50 limit for everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My kids got $20 gift cards while the twins got iPhones. How is that fair?" "The phones were on sale," she said dismissively, avoiding my eyes as she continued tidying up. "Besides, they need them for safety reasons. They're getting to that age where they're more independent. My children are nearly the same age, Mom, and those phones cost at least $700 each, plus the accessories. It's just a gift, Rachel. Why do you always have to make everything into such a big deal? The twins have certain expectations." I felt something snap inside me. Certain expectations? What does that even mean? Mom finally looked at me, her expression hardening. "Well, they're used to a certain lifestyle. Heather and Brian provide very well for them. They get the best of everything. And my children don't deserve the same consideration? Because Mark and I can't afford to provide luxury items? That's not what I meant," Mom backpedaled. "It's just different. If you'd gone to law school like we suggested, instead of becoming a teacher." "So that's it," I interrupted. "This isn't about the twins needing phones. This is about you being disappointed in my life choices." "Don't put words in my mouth," Mom snapped. "I'm proud of you. Teaching is a noble profession." The way she said noble made it sound like a consolation prize. "Do you have any idea how this made my children feel?" I asked. "Lily asked me if Grandma loves Emma and Mason more than them." "She did not," Mom scoffed. "Children don't think that way unless adults put ideas in their heads. You're being too sensitive, just like always." I heard footsteps and turned to see Dad entering the room. He took one look at our faces and started to retreat. "No, Dad, stay," I insisted. "I want to hear what you think about this too." But Mom cut in before he could speak. "Robert was just going to check the mail," she said pointedly. And Dad, ever conflict avoidant, nodded and disappeared. "You need to apologize for ruining Christmas with this attitude," Mom continued once he was gone. "And frankly, I'm getting tired of your jealousy toward your sister." "Jealousy?" I repeated incredulously. "Is that what you think this is about?" "Mom, this is about you breaking a promise and hurting my children in the process. If you're going to be like this, maybe you should leave," she said coldly. "And think about whether this is really the example you want to set for your kids. Throwing tantrums when you don't get your way." I stared at her, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity the dynamic that had shaped my entire life. Mom would never acknowledge her favoritism. She would never see the pain it caused. And she would always blame me for noticing it. "I am setting an example for my kids," I said quietly. "I'm showing them that they deserve to be treated with respect and fairness, and that it's okay to stand up for themselves when someone breaks a promise. There will be consequences for this attitude, Rachel," she warned as I headed for the door. "There already have been consequences, Mom. For all of us." I was shaking as I got back into my car, a mixture of adrenaline, anger, and oddly, relief washing over me. For the first time in my life, I had confronted the elephant in the room instead of pretending not to see it. As I drove home, I considered calling Heather but decided against it. This wasn't about her, not really. This was between me and my mother. And for once, I wasn't going to back down and pretend everything was fine. If you've ever had to confront a parent about their behavior, you know how terrifying it can be. Your palms sweat, your voice shakes, and part of you still feels like that little kid who should just keep quiet and be grateful. But sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way forward, even when it means risking a relationship. Has anyone else reached this breaking point with a family member? Let me know in the comments how you handled it. Now, let's see what happened next in this family drama. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in tense silence. No calls from Mom. No family group text messages about New Year's plans. Just radio silence. But social media told a different story. Heather posted photos of the twins with their new phones, captioned, "So blessed to have such generous parents. Family tradition, Christmas joy." Then later, a vague post about toxic family members and protecting your peace that wasn't tagged but felt unmistakably aimed at me. Mark was livid when I showed him. "That's rich coming from them," he muttered. "You finally stand up after years of this treatment and you're the toxic one?" The kids noticed something was wrong. Lily asked why Grandma hadn't called to thank them for the picture frame we'd given her. Ethan wanted to know if we'd see Grandma and Grandpa for New Year's like we usually did. I tried to explain things in a way that wouldn't vilify their grandparents but would still be honest. "Grandma and I had a disagreement," I told them over breakfast one morning. "Sometimes in families, people need a little space from each other to figure things out." "Is it about the presents?" Lily asked. "Always perceptive." "Sort of," I admitted. "It's about treating everyone fairly and keeping promises. Like how you tell us we have to share equally with each other," Ethan asked. "Exactly like that," I said, grateful for their innocent wisdom. When I confided in my closest friends, I was surprised by how many shared similar stories. My friend, Tara's mother-in-law, consistently gave better gifts to her son's children than to Tara's. My colleague, Julia's parents, had paid for her brother's entire wedding but told her they could only contribute a token amount to hers. "It's so common it's practically a cliché," Julia told me over coffee. "But that doesn't make it hurt any less." Dad's birthday rolled around in mid-January. I sent a card and gift as always, but received no acknowledgement. A week later, my Aunt Judith called. "Your mother is very upset," she began without preamble. "I'm sure she is," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "She says you accused her of playing favorites and ruined Christmas." "Did she tell you what actually happened?" I asked, then explained the gift discrepancy and the broken promise. Aunt Judith was quiet for a moment. "That does sound unfair," she finally admitted. "But you know your mother. She's never been good at admitting she's wrong." "I'm not asking for a full confession," I said. "Just some acknowledgement and a commitment to treat my kids fairly in the future." "I'll talk to her," Judith promised. Though we both knew it probably wouldn't help. A few days later, my cousin Megan texted me screenshots of a conversation in the extended family group chat that I wasn't part of. Mom was complaining about my jealousy issues and how I was always competing with Heather. It was a complete rewriting of what had happened, painting me as the unreasonable one. The hardest part was the emotional toll it took. I found myself losing sleep, replaying conversations in my head, questioning whether I had overreacted. Mark noticed I wasn't eating much and suggested I talk to someone professional. "You're not crazy," he assured me. "What your mom did was wrong. But maybe a therapist could help you process all this." I made an appointment with a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Carter listened to my story and nodded thoughtfully. "What you're describing sounds like a family system with clear golden child and scapegoat roles," she explained. "It's very common and extremely painful for the scapegoated child, even well into adulthood." She suggested some reading on family systems and helped me develop strategies for maintaining boundaries while managing my expectations. "Your mother may never acknowledge this dynamic," she warned me. "Are you prepared for that possibility?" I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine for the sake of peace. In February, I discovered through Facebook that my parents had taken Heather's family on a weekend trip to a ski resort. There were photos of them all together, smiling in matching scarves, captioned, "Weekend with the grandkids. Making memories." My kids hadn't even been invited. I shut my laptop and cried for an hour. That night, I got a text from Heather. "Mom says you're still upset about Christmas. Don't you think it's time to apologize and move on?" The family feels incomplete without you. I stared at the message in disbelief. She wanted Emmy to apologize? For what exactly? I texted back. For overreacting and making Mom feel bad. You know how sensitive she is. The irony was almost laughable. I'd been labeled the sensitive one my entire life. But somehow, Mom's feelings were the ones that needed protection. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine, I wrote back. When Mom is ready to talk about what really happened and how we can make things more fair going forward, I'll be here. She didn't reply, and I didn't push it. I was learning that stepping back from these interactions was sometimes the only way to preserve my sanity. Mark suggested we consider cutting contact completely, at least for a while. We could focus on building relationships with people who value all of us equally. He said one night after the kids were asleep. I understood his perspective, but something held me back. Despite everything, these were still my parents, my children's grandparents. There was still a stubborn part of me that hoped for resolution, for acknowledgement, for change. Let's give it a little more time, I told him. I'm not ready to close that door completely. Little did I know, an unexpected visitor was about to shed new light on our family dynamics in a way I never could have anticipated. 3 months after Christmas, I was home grading papers when there was an unexpected knock at the door. I opened it to find my father standing awkwardly on the porch, hands in his pockets. Dad? Is everything okay? In all my adult life, he had never come to see me alone. Can I come in, Rachel? He asked, his voice unusually serious. I led him to the living room, noticing how he glanced around at the family photos and children's artwork that decorated our modest home. Mom doesn't know I'm here, he said after declining my offer of coffee. She wouldn't approve. Why are you here, Dad? I asked directly, both curious and apprehensive. He took a deep breath. I need to tell you something. About your mother. About this whole situation. He paused, seeming to gather his courage. I've been uncomfortable with how your mother treats you and Heather differently for years. I should have said something long ago. I sat in stunned silence as my father began to explain. Your mother came from money, he continued. Her family had a big house in the suburbs, country club membership, the works. I came from a blue-collar background. My dad worked at the factory. Mom was a secretary. We met in college, but I was there on scholarship while her parents paid her way. This was new information. Mom had always been vague about her upbringing, and Dad rarely talked about the past. Eleanor's parents didn't approve of me, he said, using Mom's full name in a way that sounded strange to my ears. They thought she could do better than an accountant. I think she spent our whole marriage trying to prove them wrong, showing that she made the right choice, that she could still have the lifestyle they wanted for her. What does this have to do with how she treats me and Heather? I asked, though I was beginning to see the connection. Heather married Brian, who comes from money and makes a lot of it. They live the kind of life Eleanor was raised to value. You chose Mark, a good man who works with his hands like my father did. You became a teacher. In Eleanor's mind, Heather succeeded where she's concerned, and you. He trailed off. I followed in your footsteps, I finished quietly. Dad nodded, looking pained. She identifies with Heather, sees herself in Heather's choices. And she's been supporting them financially for years. What do you mean, supporting them? The private school tuition for the twins. Eleanor pays it directly from her inheritance. Has since they started kindergarten. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The private school costs over $20,000 per child per year, I said slowly. And she's been paying that while watching me struggle to buy my kids new winter coats? Dad couldn't meet my eyes. There's more. The Christmas gifts, the surprise vacations, the summer camps. She's been supplementing their lifestyle significantly. They present as though Brian's job covers everything. But the truth is, without Eleanor's help, they'd be living much more modestly. Does Heather know you're telling me this? No. I don't think she fully realizes how much Eleanor contributes either. The money comes from Eleanor's separate account, from her family inheritance. I've let it happen for too long. Dad pulled out an old photo album from his jacket. I found this in the attic last week. It has pictures from when you girls were young. We looked through it together. There I was at my science fair, proudly displaying my project with Dad beaming beside me. Mom was nowhere in the photo. Another showed my high school graduation, where Dad had clearly taken me out for ice cream afterward. Just the two of us. Eleanor was at Heather's dance recital that day, Dad explained. She said one of us should go to each event. But looking back through these, I realized there's a pattern. I attended your events. She attended Heather's. Why, Dad? Why did she pick Heather over me? Dad shook his head sadly. It's not that simple. Eleanor's parents played favorites too. Her younger sister was their golden child. Eleanor was always trying to prove herself, to earn their approval. I think she's recreating the dynamic she grew up with, but this time casting herself in the role of the parent who bestows favor rather than the child who was deprived of it. It was like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. Not a happy picture, but at least one that made sense. Why are you telling me this now, Dad? Because I've been a coward, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I've let this happen year after year, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that it wasn't that bad, that you were strong enough to handle it. But seeing what happened at Christmas, seeing how it affected your children, I couldn't stay silent anymore. He reached out and took my hand. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you before. I felt tears streaming down my face, a mixture of validation and grief. All these years, I hadn't imagined the favoritism. It was real, and even worse than I'd thought. What happens now? I asked. I've told Eleanor I want us to go to family counseling. She refused at first, but I've made it clear this is non-negotiable if she wants me to stay. I don't know if she'll ever be able to see what she's doing or change, but I'm going to try. In the meantime, I want to rebuild my relationship with you and your children, if you'll let me. After Dad left, I called Mark at work and told him everything. He came home early, and we talked late into the night about what this meant for our family. Are you okay? He asked, holding me close. Not really, I admitted. But I think I will be. At least now I know I wasn't crazy all these years. And Dad finally sees it too. Do you think your mom will ever acknowledge what she's done? I thought about it. I don't know. But for the first time, I feel like I don't need her to in order to move forward. A week after Dad's visit, I received an email from an unexpected source. Brian, Heather's husband. The subject line read simply, "Can we talk? I'm in town for a business lunch tomorrow," he wrote. "Would you be willing to meet me at Westfield Cafe around 2 p.m.? Just you and me. There are some things I think we should discuss." I was curious enough to agree, though I told Mark where I was going just in case. Brian and I had always been cordial but never particularly close. What could he possibly want to discuss without Heather present? The cafe was busy with the afternoon crowd when I arrived. Brian was already there, dressed in his usual business attire but looking unusually tired. After ordering coffee, he got straight to the point. "I think you should know that things aren't as perfect in our household as they appear," he said. "The twins have become difficult." Entitled, "Nothing is ever enough for them anymore." This was not what I had expected to hear. Last week, Mason threw a tantrum because we wouldn't upgrade his phone to the even newer model that just came out. Emma made another student cry at school because the girl was wearing the same designer shoes as her. We're dealing with weekly calls from teachers about their behavior. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said cautiously. "But why are you telling me this?" Brian sighed. "Because I think your mother is part of the problem. She undermines our parenting constantly. If we say no to something, she buys it for them anyway. If we try to establish consequences, she swoops in with treats and excuses. It's getting out of control." I couldn't help feeling a twinge of satisfaction that Eleanor's golden family wasn't so golden after all. But I also felt genuine sympathy for Brian. He looked exhausted. "Heather won't stand up to her," he continued. "There's this dynamic between them. Heather needs your mother's approval so badly she'll sacrifice our children's character development to get it." "That sounds familiar," I murmured. "The truth is, Rachel, I envy your family." Brian's admission caught me off guard. "Your kids are polite, grounded, and genuinely happy. They don't measure their worth by what brand of clothes they wear. They actually seem to like each other. Do you know how rare that is? The twins can barely be in the same room without competing for attention." As Brian talked, I realized he wasn't the smug, materialistic person I had mentally painted him to be. He was a concerned father watching his children develop problematic behaviors and feeling powerless to stop it. The financial support is another issue, he added, lowering his voice. Did you know your mother pays the twins' school tuition? I recently found out, I admitted. It creates this weird power dynamic. Heather and I make good money, but your mother has made us dependent on her in ways that aren't healthy. We should be able to say no to her, but the threat of withdrawing financial support is always looming. Before we parted, Brian said something that stayed with me. I think Heather is trapped in a role that she can't escape. Your mother needs her to be the successful daughter so badly that Heather doesn't know who she is outside of that identity. 2 days later, I ran into my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, at the grocery store. Unlike my mother, Aunt Patricia had always been warm and down to earth, though we didn't see her often as she lived several states away. "Rachel! What a wonderful surprise!" she exclaimed, hugging me tight. "I'm just in town visiting a college friend. How are you, dear?" I gave her the condensed version of recent events, unsure how much she already knew from my mother. To my surprise, she nodded knowingly. "History repeats itself," she said with a sad smile. "Your mother and I went through something very similar growing up. Over coffee in the store's cafe, Aunt Patricia shared insights I'd never heard before. Your grandmother was obsessed with status and appearances," she explained. "I was the pretty, social one who married well. Eleanor was smart but more awkward, more academic. Our mother favored me shamelessly. But Mom ended up recreating the same dynamic with me and Heather," I said, puzzled. "Wouldn't she have wanted to break that cycle?" Aunt Patricia shook her head. "That's the tricky thing about family patterns. Sometimes people who were hurt by them end up perpetuating them. Eleanor was the less favored child, but instead of ensuring neither of her daughters experienced that pain, she simply switched roles. Now she gets to be the one giving approval rather than constantly seeking it." "Did you and Mom ever resolve things?" I asked. "Not really. We maintain a surface relationship, but there's always that history between us. The difference is, I can see it clearly. I don't think Eleanor ever has." These conversations gave me a new perspective on my mother. Not excusing her behavior, but helping me understand it as part of a generational pattern rather than just personal rejection. The biggest surprise came when Heather called me late one evening after the twins were asleep. Her voice sounded strange, almost vulnerable. "Brian told me he talked to you," she began. I was angry at first, but I've been doing some thinking. "About what?" I asked cautiously. "About Mom. About all of us." She paused. "We had a huge fight yesterday. She bought the twins new laptops after Brian and I explicitly told her no. When I tried to return them, she threatened to stop paying for their school." "That's manipulation, Heather." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm starting to see it. The thing is, I'm not sure who I am without Mom's approval. My whole life has been about meeting her expectations, being the daughter she wanted." It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. Heather admitted she'd always been jealous of my independence, my ability to make choices without constantly seeking Eleanor's blessing. "Did you know what she was doing all these years?" I asked. "The way she treated me and my kids differently?" "I think I did," Heather admitted after a long pause, but acknowledging it would have meant giving up my position as the favorite. And that was too scary. "Dad came to see me," I told her. "He knows about all of it. He told me," she said, surprising me again. "He's finally standing up to Mom. I've never seen him like this before." By the end of our conversation, something had shifted between us. We weren't suddenly best friends, but for the first time, we were seeing each other as individuals rather than competitors in our mother's approval game. "I want things to be different," Heather said before we hung up. "For us, for our kids. I just don't know how to make that happen with Mom." "Maybe we start by changing things between you and me," I suggested, "and let Mom catch up when she's ready." "I'd like that," Heather said, and I believed her. A week after my conversation with Heather, Dad called to invite us all to dinner at a neutral restaurant location. By all, I mean you, Mark, and the kids, plus Heather, Brian, and the twins, and your mother and me, of course. "Is Mom on board with this?" I asked skeptically. She's agreed to come, Dad said. That's all I can promise for now. The evening was set for Friday at Castellano's, an Italian restaurant we'd all enjoyed in the past. I prepared the kids as best I could, explaining that we were trying to work things out as a family. Will Grandma be mad at us? Ethan asked worriedly. No, sweetheart. This isn't about you or anything you did, I assured him. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements they need to resolve. When we arrived, everyone else was already seated at a large round table in the back. Mom sat stiffly beside Dad, looking as though she'd rather be anywhere else. Heather gave me a small, nervous smile. The twins were subdued, perhaps sensing the tension. Thank you all for coming, Dad began once we'd ordered. I know things have been difficult lately, but I believe we need to address what's happening in our family. Mom immediately crossed her arms defensively. I don't see why we need to make a public spectacle of family matters. We're hardly causing a spectacle, Eleanor, Dad said firmly. And sometimes neutral territory helps everyone stay calm. It was strange hearing Dad take charge like this after so many years of deferring to Mom. The issue, he continued, is that there's been a pattern of favoritism in our family that has hurt people. It's not fair, and it needs to change. Mom's face flushed. That's ridiculous. I love all my grandchildren equally. Mom, Heather spoke up, surprising everyone. That's not true, and we all know it. You treat my kids differently than Rachel's. You always have. Mom looked at Heather with betrayal in her eyes. How can you say that? After everything I've done for you and the twins? That's exactly the point, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle but firm. You've done things for Heather's family that you never offered to do for mine. The private school tuition, the extravagant gifts, the surprise vacations. You never asked for those things, Mom replied. Would you have said yes if I had? I challenged. Mom's silence was answer enough. The conversation continued awkwardly through appetizers. Mom alternated between defensive justifications and tearful attempts to change the subject. But something unexpected happened during the main course. As Mom was mid-sentence explaining why the twins needed their phones, Emma suddenly interrupted. Grandma, you're not listening to Aunt Rachel, she said. She's trying to tell you that you hurt her feelings, and you're just making excuses. The table fell silent. Emma, who had always been Mom's clear favorite among the grandchildren, was actually calling her out. Mom looked stricken. Emma, darling, this is a complicated adult situation. It doesn't seem that complicated to me, Emma replied, with the directness of an 11-year-old. You promised everyone would get the same presents, and then you didn't do that. That's not fair. Something seemed to break in Mom. Her carefully constructed justifications crumbled in the face of her beloved granddaughter's simple truth. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry in earnest. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said between sobs. I wanted to give you nice things. But why not give everyone nice things? Emma persisted. Lily and Ethan are just as much your grandchildren as we are. Brian looked at his daughter with a mixture of surprise and pride. That's a good question, Emma. Mom couldn't answer, but her tears seemed different now, less defensive, more genuine. Dad put his arm around her shoulders. Eleanor, he said gently, I think it's time to tell the truth about why this pattern is so familiar to you. Between Dad and Aunt Patricia's revelations, Mom slowly, reluctantly began to talk about her own childhood, about being the less favored daughter, about never measuring up to her sister in their mother's eyes. I swore I'd never do that to my children, she admitted. But somehow I ended up recreating exactly what hurt me so much. The difference, I said, is that you have a chance to break this cycle now, Mom. To heal our family in a way your mother never did. By the end of dinner, we had established some concrete first steps. Mom agreed to speak with a therapist about these patterns. We set clear expectations about gifts. Either the same value for all grandchildren or coordinated between both families in advance. Most importantly, we agreed to start having these difficult conversations openly instead of letting resentments fester. It wasn't an instant fix. Mom struggled to admit how her actions had impacted me and my children. Heather found it hard to give up her position as the favored daughter. But for the first time, we were acknowledging the dynamic instead of pretending it didn't exist. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of small steps forward and occasional steps back. Mom invited Lily and Ethan for a special grandchildren-only day, something she'd previously only done with the twins. She seemed genuinely interested in Lily's art projects and Ethan's science experiments, though there were still awkward moments when old habits emerged. Heather and I began texting more regularly, sharing parenting challenges and childhood memories from new perspectives. "Do you remember how Mom always made us compete for the front seat in the car?" Heather wrote one day. "I'm just realizing how messed up that was." "Remember how she'd compare our grades at the dinner table?" I replied. "Always pitting us against each other instead of celebrating our individual strengths." These shared reflections helped us see how we'd both been shaped by Eleanor's parenting, albeit in different ways. Heather had become achievement-oriented and status-conscious, constantly seeking external validation. I had become fiercely independent but with deep-seated insecurities about my worth. Mark remained cautiously supportive of the reconciliation attempts. "I'm glad things are improving," he said one night after I'd had coffee with Mom for the first time in months. "But I'm watching carefully. The first sign that she's hurting you or the kids again, we step back." I appreciated his protectiveness while also feeling hopeful that it wouldn't come to that. The road ahead would be long and imperfect, but at least we were finally acknowledging the map. As Thanksgiving approached, I found myself growing anxious about the upcoming holiday season. It had been almost a year since the iPhone incident that had finally brought our family's issues to the surface. While we'd made progress, the thought of another Christmas together filled me with equal parts hope and dread. "Do you think Mom will really stick to the gift rules this year?" I asked Mark as we updated our holiday budget one evening. "I think your dad will make sure of it," he replied. "He seems committed to making things right." We'd all agreed to continue the $50 limit per person, but with a new twist. The adults would draw names for gift exchanges instead of everyone buying for everyone. For the grandchildren, Mom had agreed that all gifts would be approved by both sets of parents in advance. When Christmas Eve arrived, I found myself checking and double-checking the gifts we were bringing to my parents' house the next day. Everything was wrapped in matching paper, carefully selected to be equal in value and thoughtfulness. "Mom, are you sure Grandma will like the photo calendar we made her?" Lily asked as she helped me load gifts into the car. "I think she'll love it," I assured her, touched that despite everything, my daughter still cared about her grandmother's approval. We arrived at my parents' house around noon on Christmas Day. The familiar decorations were up, the Nutcracker collection, the white lights outlining the windows, but something felt different. The energy in the house was lighter somehow. Dad greeted us at the door with warm hugs. Mom appeared behind him, looking both nervous and hopeful. "Merry Christmas, everyone," she said, bending down to hug Lily and Ethan. "I'm so glad you're here." Heather's family arrived shortly after, the twins racing in with enthusiasm but noticeably more controlled than in previous years. Brian gave me a knowing nod. They'd clearly been working on setting better boundaries. Christmas dinner was more balanced than I could remember. Mom asked Lily about her recent art show at school and listened attentively to Ethan's explanation of his science project. When Emma began interrupting Lily's story, Brian gently reminded her to wait her turn. The subtle shift in dynamics was small but significant. When the time came for presents, I felt my stomach tighten reflexively. This would be the true test of whether anything had really changed. Dad handed out the first gifts, all similar-sized packages to each of the grandchildren. "These are from Grandma and Grandpa," he explained with a meaningful glance at Mom. "We hope you like them." I watched as all 4 kids unwrapped their presents simultaneously. Inside, each box was a personalized gift that clearly reflected their individual interests. Art supplies for Lily, a science kit for Ethan, a journal with fancy pens for Emma, and a model airplane kit for Mason. All were of similar value, all thoughtfully selected. "Grandma, this is exactly what I wanted," Lily exclaimed, examining her new professional colored pencils. I caught Mom's eye across the room and saw genuine pleasure in her expression, not the performative excitement she'd shown when the twins received their phones last year, but real joy at seeing all her grandchildren equally happy. Later, as the kids played together in the den, Mom asked if I could help her get dessert ready in the kitchen. Once we were alone, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I owe you an apology, Rachel," she said. A real one, not just the surface apologies I've been making. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted. I treated you and your children unfairly for years. I recreated the very patterns that hurt me as a child, and I did it without even realizing what I was doing. Therapy has been helping? I asked gently. She nodded. It's hard work. Harder than I expected. Looking at yourself honestly isn't easy at my age. But I'm trying, Rachel. I really am. That's all any of us can ask, I said, surprising myself by reaching out to squeeze her hand. I know I can't undo the past, she continued. But I hope we can build something better going forward. For all of us, but especially for the children. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still moments of tension. Still occasions when old patterns threatened to resurface. Mom still sometimes slipped into comparing the grandchildren or making comments about our different lifestyles. But now, when it happened, we could name it. And she was usually quick to catch herself and apologize. After dessert, Dad insisted on taking a family photo by the tree. As we gathered together, Mark and me with our kids, Heather and Brian with theirs, Mom and Dad in the middle, I realized that for the first time in years, everyone's smile felt genuine. Later that night, after we'd returned home and put the kids to bed, I called my therapist as we'd planned to process the day. It went better than I expected, I told her. Not perfect, but better. Family healing isn't about reaching perfection, she reminded me. It's about moving toward healthier patterns, even if progress is slow and imperfect. As I sat in our quiet living room, looking at the photos from the day, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past year. The painful confrontation, the difficult truths, the slow and sometimes awkward steps toward reconciliation. We couldn't change the past. Mom would always carry the scars of her own childhood, and I would always carry the memories of feeling second best for so many years. But we could choose to break the cycle for the next generation. We could build something new from the broken pieces of what came before. Mark joined me on the couch, putting his arm around my shoulders. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, leaning into him. I think I really am. Family favoritism can leave scars that last a lifetime, but it's never too late to heal and create something better. My story isn't perfect. We're still working through things, but I'm sharing it because I know many of you have experienced similar situations. Has a family member ever shown blatant favoritism in your life? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life family stories. And remember, breaking generational patterns takes courage, but creating a more equitable family legacy for our children makes it all worthwhile. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in navigating your own family dynamics.